Hey guys, Todd here from Construction Leading Edge. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast today. We've got a great interview for you today with Wes Palmisano. And here's what we're going to hear about. Wes has scaled a business up to $250 million and 250 employees, and some of the keys to doing that. You'll hear about what he calls the Renegade approach. We'll talk about the importance of having systems, but providing some guardrails and allowing creativity within those guardrails, and some specific examples there. Wes shares the surprising realization that he had that allowed them to jump from 100 employees up to 250 employees. We talk about the phase of your projects that you want to focus 90% of your effort on so you can get out of reactive and constant firefighting mode. This has been the key to their growth and their success. And you'll hear about his advice for business owners. This may be for you. If you want to scale up your business, but you struggle to let go of control, you're not alone. And Wes has some advice for you on that. All right, let's get to it. My interview with Wes Palmisano. You may want to take notes. Enjoy. Wes, thanks for being on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, where you're located, and then we'll dig into some of the backstory.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. Wes Palmisano. I'm located in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is where I was born and raised. And I grew up in a construction family, working with my grandfather, my dad, my uncle. Had a great opportunity from a young age to start out in the field and learn the trades of construction from some real craftsmen in the industry, and was very fortunate to have that experience. And my grandfather started a business named WJ Palmisano after coming back from World War II in 1950 here in the New Orleans community. They primarily focused on residential construction. I went to school at LSU, graduated in construction management. Always knew I wanted to be in the construction industry. And then coming out of school, went to work for a local building general contractor and spent 12 years there, learned a tremendous amount through that experience, and was very fortunate again to kind of learn another side of the business versus what I grew up doing. And then in 2013, decided to found and start a business that initially was focused on building construction, which is where I had spent the prior 12 years, pretty typical commercial building contractor. And then a year and a half later, my dad actually retired, and he and my uncle agreed to sign over the shell of the company in terms of family continuity, the one that my grandfather had started in 1950. So I'm also fortunate to have that family continuity and kind of be somewhat of a family legacy, but at the same time have this entrepreneurial startup that's embedded within that. So today our parent company is WJ Palmisano, which is the family business that started in 1950. Below that are a series of subsidiaries. The building construction business is called Impetus. And then alongside that, we have a heavy civil and infrastructure business that we started in 15, so another entrepreneurial venture after starting as a building contractor in 13. And then in 2018, we conceived an idea for Renegade, RNGD LLC, but we call it Renegade internally, and that's the latest of our ventures. So today we're somewhat of a house of brands organized underneath the umbrella of WJ Palmisano.
Got it. And let's talk about Impetus. It seems like there's more to that name. There's a story behind it. There's a vision behind the name Impetus. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that name we actually searched around for a name that was representative of our ethos and the mission that we were on in terms of what we were trying to accomplish. And we wanted to find a real English word that we could trademark and own. And that's not easy to do. You know, I guess for those who have gone down this path before of trying to find a brand that's unique to you that you can actually trademark and own. But, you know, I wanted it to be a real English word. And so we landed on this concept of impetus, which is the force that makes things happen. And our goal is to move the industry forward. And so in keeping with our core ethos of this concept that we started as an organization that had these big aspirations and goals to move the industry forward, it seemed fitting that we found a word that was representative of our mission.
What are some of the problems, some of the big problems in the construction industry that that you've set out to tackle?
I was inspired, and I'll maybe preface this by saying that I'll touch first on building construction, because that was our core business that we started in. And what was evident to us from the beginning was that there was an opportunity to improve the way that projects are delivered. Certainly, a lot of inspiration has and can be drawn from other types of manufacturing, the way that those industries have evolved. And of course, the easy examples to point to are automotive manufacturing, shipbuilding. I've got a good friend who's a shipbuilder, and I sit back and look at how they assemble these highly complex, large ships. And it's completely different than the approach that the building industry takes on their normal projects. And in drawing from other industries, it was always evident to us that there's got to be a better way. And, our industry hasn't evolved a tremendous amount in the way that we deliver projects over the last 50 or maybe even 100 years, arguably. And so it was evident to us early on that we wanted to be part of a force and an opportunity to move the needle. But of course, with a complete recognition that it's not something we could accomplish alone. And so part of our goals as well is to help others in the industry maybe identify some ideas that they could be more innovative and, be part of a bigger movement to try to evolve the way that buildings and projects are delivered. And so certainly I think a lot of that relates to opportunities that exist in moving what happens on the job site into a factory. That is certainly easier said than done, and is a big challenge that, certainly we are also very grounded in the way things have been done historically. We still do a lot of traditional construction work. And so, we're kind of founded in the fundamentals of the industry, but also this desire and kind of burning desire, I guess I'd describe it, to be part of the equation that maybe helps move the industry forward a little bit with each project we undertake. And so for us, it's very incremental. Can we incorporate some unique idea into every project is our goal that helps move the industry forward a little bit.
I agree. The way we build things today hasn't changed much from 100 years ago. And I remember talking to one CEO of a company who had a precast. He was a general contractor, and he started his own precast concrete manufacturing plant to do variety of precast. And he said, we're basically, in some cases, we're building buildings the same way we did back in ancient Rome, by stacking rocks in a lot of cases, which is an interesting way to look at it. Why? What are the roadblocks to innovation in construction? What do you think is holding construction back? Like, is it the fact that we're so risk averse? I mean, everything, when I was brought up as a commercial project manager, my job was to assign risk, right? And reduce risk, and mistakes are bad. And there's just no margin for error, which tends to put a damper on innovation. But what do you think? Like, what are the belief patterns, the big roadblocks, the underlying root causes that are hampering innovation in construction?
Yeah, I first thing that comes to mind, well, I guess maybe a couple, but I'll touch on a few different aspects. One is, you mentioned the idea of risk management as a general contractor, and that, of course, is because that the industry is compressed into very tight margins. So as a building contractor, there's very little room for error and not a lot of margin to experiment with new ways of doing things, because you generally have to stick with the tried and true path when you're operating on a razor thin margin with a ton of risk that you're managing. And so it becomes a lot about risk management, not necessarily about innovation on the typical project. So I think that's one equation, is just risk management and overall opportunity from a profitability perspective that contractors are faced with. But maybe coupled with that, I always look at the owner or client side of the equation that ultimately leads the process. And what we try to do is gravitate towards clients and owners that appreciate the way we operate and are looking for an opportunity to do things differently and be more innovative. and the client has to be on board with it because, of course, a client makes the decision right at the beginning of a project of what delivery method they're going to use. And if we just go to a traditional design, bid, build methodology, how much opportunity is there really? I mean, you're being handed a complete set of plans and being told to just build what's on the plan. So, not a lot of opportunity for innovation there. So where we've gravitated as an organization in the projects where we do best and find that our teams are able to really show up in a big way are the ones that are significantly more collaborative, where design build is amazing and probably our favorite delivery method. But what we always encourage is that even if it's not a design build contracting method, everyone needs to be at the table at the beginning. So the more collaboration, the better. Bring teams together, really leverage everyone's capabilities to drive real value into a project is our core fundamental belief. And through that early involvement, we've always said that 90% of a project's success happens before you break ground. And if we can get it right on the front end and incorporate some ideas that are maybe unique and innovative into each project before the design is finished, we're going to have a lot more success in the field. And so I think it's delivery methods and methodologies that not all clients are really looking for that type of delivery where everyone is at the table from the beginning. Although I am happy to see that I think increasingly owners are starting to come around to that idea and understand that there's real value in collaboration and not having individual sectors of the project be segmented into their own space. So I'm excited to see that it seems that the industry is overall evolving in that direction. I think that's a big part of it. And then our other opportunity where we see the innovation showing up is actually the old idea. So you mentioned back to the days of Rome. I've always loved the concept of a master builder. And the master builder is a general contractor, of course, at its core, but showing up with the capability to do a lot of the different scopes and trades of work. And I think that concept that we just call true builder in our vocabulary is one of our founding principles, along with being innovative, is being a true builder, where we're bringing real value to the equation on our projects. And those where we can leverage all the capabilities of our organization tend to have significantly higher client satisfaction, significantly more value. We're coming in under budget, ahead of schedule, just all the different metrics you would look at as a successful project delivery. We're able to check every box when we show up as a true builder with a heavy involvement in pre-construction.
When you say a master builder, what's the difference between, what does that look like, being a master builder? What do you mean by that?
What I think of is the way I grew up. And I look back at the way I was raised and working around my grandfather, my dad, and my uncle. They were what I'd call kind of an old school general contractor. They did all the work themselves, trade partners for MEP systems most of the time, but otherwise, the vast majority of the work they did themselves. And they understood the fundamentals of design. So making something beautiful aesthetically, being able to understand the principles and fundamentals of engineering and what it actually takes to put a building together structurally. And so I look at some of the things that they did and the skill set they brought to the equation is design from a aesthetic perspective, but also the engineering aspect and having the talents and abilities to actually do all the work yourself and to do it hands-on. And so when I think of that old concept of the stonemason, the master builder, of course, they were the architect, they were the engineer, and they did the work.
Yeah, and it's remarkable to me to look at a building that's 150, 200 years old, and to look at the level of detail and the craftsmanship, the stonemasonry, the brick work, the ornamental iron work. I look at some of these things and think, I was an owner's rep and a general contractor for most of my career. And if somebody said, Todd, we have to build this building, I don't know that we could find those kind of craftsmen. And they were just a different breed. So I'm curious about this master builder concept. When you look at the typical approach, the typical breakdown of assigning risk, the general contractor, the construction manager, and then the sub trades, right? What are some of the fundamental problems in that model that people who have never really thought about it might not be aware of? It seems like there are some seeds of destruction. Some people would even say the system's kind of designed to fail in some ways. But what are some of the big problems you see between having this general contractor who is assigning risk out to a variety of subtrades?
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental structure of the industry, of course, just sets up a bunch of different potential conflicts, which, is an owner, of course, trying to move all of their project risk between the design team, typical delivery where you've got contracts with the designers, in a typical scenario of an architect, and then below them a bunch of sub-consultants, and then hiring separately a general contractor. So there's this dynamic between the contractor and the designers as to who has liability for gaps and issues in the plans that generally the owner doesn't want to pay for, of course. And then on the construction side, very similarly, the general contractor's on this razor-thin margin. And the name of the game in the GC business as a modern-day general contractor is, in theory, to make your fee with zero risk, if possible. Now, obviously, that's the holy grail and is impossible to accomplish, but certainly that's the goal, is how can we eliminate as much of the risk as possible and make our small fee? And so it, projects generally go at a very low margin, and then it sets up this conflict even within the construction team, because the general contractor's on a razor thin margin. They've theoretically moved all the risk to others. So that sets up this conflict between the entire team of, any gap or issue is not this collective solution. It's more of how do I protect my piece of the pie and make sure that someone else is covering it and I'm just moving things around, moving chess pieces around the board. So when we're working internally, that's where, as I mentioned earlier, this idea of, we call it just being a true builder. And when we're involved in a design build type of delivery, we certainly understand what that means, and that we're ultimately trying to deliver a product at a fixed price for a client. And so then it's about, among our team, how do we structure a real atmosphere of collaboration where it's less about covering your own liabilities and issues or potential risk, and more about let's work together to produce a product. And internally, we do that by reporting project profitability. I mean, this is a small thing, but just a small shift that maybe changes the attitude, which would be hard to do with an external trade partner, of course. We report profitability on the project as a whole. And so it's not this siloed mentality of, hey, I need a change order. You missed this, you didn't put this in my scope, so it eliminates all those conflicts and saying, okay, well, if the project requires it, we need to get the work done, and we're reporting and looking at profitability of the project as a whole, and we might be engaged on 5 or 6 different scopes of work. So in addition to being a general contractor, we're doing steel and concrete and millwork and site work, all these big scopes of work. And when we show up in that way, our team is then focused on, well, let's all work together to make sure that we hit our targets. And it's less finger pointing and problematic from the perspective of, I need to protect my own turf and protect my own fee. It's more of maximizing the whole and saying, how do we go out? How do we beat the schedule? How do we drive and increase production? How do we beat our productivity budgets and not necessarily worry about fighting amongst each other? And so that's one small shift that we're able to do when we're engaged self-performing work as a true builder that would be very hard to do, of course, with an external trade partner.
Yeah, absolutely. Several years ago, this was probably maybe 2010, 2012, there was a lot of talk about IPD, integrated project delivery. I've been a little removed for the past few years. Did IPD ever get any traction?
I know certainly I've read some case studies of success on specific projects, but it was not something that I love it in concept because it accomplishes some of what I was just describing that we're able to do internally. And in concept, it sounds great, but we have not been able to get traction just again, because most people, especially in the trade partner community, most of the conversations I've had with owners of trade partners, the general take is, hey, I'm like good with the way things have been done. I bid the job and I've got my profitability, and I'd rather not be in this pool where I'm exposed. I'd rather just control my own destiny rather than be in this collective pool where others end up impacting me. I'd rather just stay in my own lane. And so I think the conversations that I've had with people about it, it's been a little difficult to get people on board. And I think it's just because it's very hard when the projects and the team members are transient. Every job has different team members. It's hard to build trust among a team. And if there's no trust, then how would IPD be successful when moving from one project to the next? And every team is always different. And so the examples that I've read where IPD was effective have generally been the examples I've seen have been very large, long duration projects where you can get in and build trust among a core group of people. And it's probably not the entire project that's in the IPD delivery method. It's a few key members of a team. They've got a long history of working together. They're committed to project success. They work together over a long period of time on a very large job. And I think that's hard to replicate when you're talking about a small or mid-sized GC doing projects that don't have the same size, the same duration, and generally have a mix of trade partners that are different from one job to the next.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. What are some practical ways somebody can build trust? We're talking to we're talking to a small commercial GC, maybe even custom home builders building luxury homes, and they're operating in this GC trade partner arrangement with subcontract agreements. What are some practical ways to build trust with the team in that sort of delivery method?
Without going to IPD where there's a financial tie, one of the things that we like to do, and it sounds a little bit touchy-feely for the construction industry, because I know in the industry, certainly the kind of older way of thinking is, just come here and get your job done. And, we don't need to have, kind of few meetings as possible. Just come do your work, do what you say you're going to do, and let's get the job done. But what we try to do is we call it project success planning, where we sit down and among the key members of the team, which is not just internal, but understanding owner, designer, general contractor, and key trade partner goals. So everyone's stating, what are your goals for the project? And then how do we create win-wins? And so having a session that's very intentional around what are we all trying to accomplish here? And before we go out to the job site and start, let's get on the same page about each other's goals. And then how do we create alignment and establish what would be a win-win for this group as a team? And how do we make sure that we keep that somewhat front and center as we go through the project? And we know there are going to be conflicts. We know there are going to be issues that come up. No project or process is perfect, but at least we're grounded in this fundamental understanding of what generates a win for each other and how do we help each other achieve those goals together.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I think that's huge. I want to talk about the importance of pre-construction. After being around this stuff for 25 plus years, I realized that one of the biggest problems, one of the root cause of so many problems on job sites and therefore in construction companies is what I call the just enough to start trap. We do just enough to advance something to the next stage, sometimes just enough to get a half-ass RFP out the door, to get a developer on board, just enough to get a GC on board, just enough to get bid documents out, all the way to what do we got to do to have this crash landing, just enough to get a certificate of occupancy at the end. And it just creates this constant chaos. And in my experience, planning, pre-construction is the key to that. And that's a big mindset shift, because a lot of people think, well, I'm a good builder, right? We need to get out there and get after it, we need some diesel fumes and sawdust and make some dust and some noise, and we'll figure that stuff out when we get there, right? We'll get back to the episode in just a minute. Think about these two questions. First, do you have a clear, actionable plan? In other words, a strategy for your business for the next 12 months. Second, does your team know exactly where you're headed and how you plan to get there? If your business was a road trip, are you just driving aimlessly without a map, hoping you'll get there, or do you have a clear destination and a route? If your business was a football team, are you just running around the field without a game plan, playing pickup ball, or do you have a strategy to win the game, like the pros do? Here's the reality. As the leader, it's your job to create the strategy, and your team is counting on you for that. If you'd like some help with that, for a limited time, you can download our free strategic planning guide. It's the same guide that has helped hundreds of construction business owners gain clarity, set clear goals, and be able to communicate a winning strategy to their teams. In just 60 to 90 minutes, you'll map out your plan for the next year. No more guessing, no more drifting. And it's the first step toward designing the business that you want. In fact, it's the first step in our Systematize Your Construction Business program. If you want to get your hands on that, head over to constructionleadingedge.com/planning, PLANNING, to download your free strategic planning guide. Stop running around in circles. Stop just treading water. Get clarity on the vision and direction of your company. Go to constructionleadingedge.com/planning and download your free strategic planning guide today. How, in your opinion, how important is pre-construction? If you're talking to somebody who doesn't really put a lot of value on the pre-planning, they're more of a superintendent mindset that just let me get out there and get after it. How important would you say the pre-construction process is?
Yeah, I am a very big believer in the pre-construction process and its impact on a project. And I mentioned this earlier briefly, that one of our founding principles is that 90% of a project's success happens before you get to the job site. And so that is ingrained in all of our teams and through our entire organization. And where that maybe started is I go back to the beginning of my career, and I started out in project management. And in project management, of course, the typical is you go to a turnover meeting and you get handed a job from pre-construction. And so I fell into that model like most people in the industry probably did, that, you're an estimator or you're a project manager, and estimator and pre-construction department puts together the job. They turn it over to the delivery team, which project manager and superintendent. And so in that turnover process, I always found that I would maybe see things differently, look for opportunities to do it different. And my attitude was always one of, well, if I want to change the outcome of something, I need to get involved. And so I started very early in my career as a young project manager, ensuring that I made time, even though it wasn't necessarily within my technical job duties. I made sure that I was involved heavily in the pre-construction of any project that I was going to end up running. And so through that experience, that just kind of snowballed into me ultimately, as I moved up the ladder with the company I work for. I went from project manager to a project senior PM and then project executive type position, where I was over a team of project managers, and I had usually 10 projects or so going on at a time. I ended up at that point actually shifting my focus, and that's where that 90% came from. I started spending 90% of my time on pre-construction. As a leader and as a project executive, I watched other project executives who did the opposite. They'd spend 10% on pre-construction and 90% on jobs. And it was pretty obvious to me that they were then in kind of a reactive mode throughout the project. And so I recognized and realized that if I put the time, energy, and effort as a leader into pre-construction, I'm able to then set the job up for success and enable success for a team where their task is then to execute the plan, because we've got an extremely comprehensive, solid plan for the project. And the team's job becomes, let's go execute on this vision and plan. And so as I started down the road of more responsibility in my own career, I quickly shifted and and spent the vast majority of my time on pre-construction. And then in founding the business, it was the same. Our early success was generated through our pre-construction approach. It's the reason we won work. It's the reason we were successful on all the jobs we executed out of the gate. And so our team, of course, is big believers in that. And we still today put a tremendous amount of emphasis on pre-construction. And rarely do we get involved with a project where we're not able to have a huge influence on the pre-construction process.
So I completely agree. And I think, how would you, well, what I'm hearing you say is the key to reducing chaos on job sites is to focus most of your effort on the pre-construction phase, because that's where you can prevent 90% of your problems. Right? Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I see a lot. We work with a lot of business owners, of custom home builders, remodeling, commercial GCs, and they are stuck in day-to-day firefighting, constantly putting out fires on job sites, and it's because they're not spending enough time in pre-construction, and they're just launching projects. Really, it's that just enough to start trap, and they're stuck in it. Mm-hmm. And because they're putting out fires all the time, they don't have time to do pre-construction, so the next project comes along, and it's sort of 3/4 baked. It has all these gaps and holes and gremlins built into it, and they're just stuck. So I agree. The key, if that's for you.
Yeah, it's a never-ending cycle. I watched it in many instances with people around me that they get stuck in that same cycle, and they're putting out fires and then couldn't get involved in the pre-con for the next one. And then the next one comes out and it's more fires. And so it just perpetuates. And at some point you've got to break that cycle and spend way more time on the front end. And, we put a tremendous amount of time, energy, and resources, which of course creates a big expense that I think many contractors also would have a hard time seeing the value in pre-construction and spending the amount that we actually spend. We'll have an entire team work on a project for 18 months before it starts. Is not unusual at all. So it's about equal. We'll spend about the same amount of time in pre-construction as what it takes to build the project. And for a large, complex job, we'll have a team of people that are focused full time for a very long period of time, and obviously huge investment in doing that. And of course, you've got to be a big believer to kind of put your money where your mouth is and make that type of investment before a job ever starts.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this. Give us an idea of the scale of your business or businesses today, like total number of employees, ballpark total annual revenue.
The collective businesses are, as I mentioned, building, infrastructure, and then what we're calling fabrication, which is a series of different capabilities. But those three businesses are all collectively scaling. This year we'll do just over $250 million in revenue. We're at 250 employees, and our mix of work in that 250 million, though, because we've created this different model in the way we operate, I certainly recognize and look at our organization and see that we're a very complex 250 million because we're not just a general contractor. I think if we were a building GC doing 250 million, our business would be significantly less complex. But because we have all these other capabilities built in the organization, we're kind of running three different businesses side by side, and it creates a tremendous amount of complication for our teams to juggle and manage. And, certainly it's not it's a machine that's pretty complex today, and we've got a lot of opportunity, I think, and that complexity, I look at it strategically and try to tell the teams that there's certainly a method to it. And I think it's a big part of what will be our growth story in the coming years. And as we take the next steps for the organization, I think it creates significant opportunity for us to scale because we have this level of complexity that certainly I'm not aware of a lot of other businesses at our size that have this type of level of complexity. I think there are a lot of big GCs that do. Mm-hmm. And so we're in a little bit of, I'd say, kind of an awkward place in our growth journey because we've got a lot of complexity, but our revenue hasn't really scaled yet to the point that kind of catches up with some of the complexities that are embedded.
Got it. How would you describe the importance of having good systems and processes in place to your success? How important have systems and processes been to your ability to scale up the business?
As a construction company, execution excellence is 100. It's kind of, in a way, somewhat feels like table stakes, because you have to be able to do that to be successful in this industry. And so I think we did a great job out of the gate as a group and as a team. We grew quickly in the beginning, which had a lot of risk associated with it. So I guess to give you a little context to that comment, in our first 36 months in business, so we started a business of one that I founded in the building industry. And 36 months later, we had over 100 people, and we did $100 million in revenue at the 36-month point for the business. And so significant scale very quickly out of the gate as a startup construction company. And in that early journey, I can look back and say that all of our success in that early journey was 100% attributable to our ability to execute. And our ability to execute is because we had a very structured system. All of our teams were on the same page. We did a good job of getting alignment, having a very structured process, and keeping things between the guardrails is the way we describe it. So our process and systems is a guardrails approach. We provide a really good framework and structure that people work within, but we encourage, because we're an entrepreneurial business, we encourage people to have creativity and to be entrepreneurial and to always seek a better way of doing things. So we're a huge believer in being learners and continuous improvement and driving change in our business. And so we want to give people the latitude to be able to put their own fingerprints on things. But of course, we've also got to be very diligent as a business to manage our risk and to keep things between the guardrails. And I think we did a really good job of that out of the gate. And we had a team that was very aligned, that were instrumental in our success and being able to look back and say that every job finished on schedule, every job finished below budget. We had the reason we were able to grow so quickly is because of the execution that we were able to bring to every project. And of course, we just touched on pre-construction. There was a very intentional focus on pre-construction during that entire time period. And our pre-construction process is extremely robust as well, that I think if most GCs saw our pre-construction process and the amount of intensity and the level of involvement we bring to pre-construction, it would probably be a little foreign to them, because our pre-construction process and all the things that we do are just as robust as what our operational process is. And so it's a very balanced approach in terms of the intentionality, attention to detail and intensity that we bring to all sides of that equation.
I'm curious about the guardrails approach. Some people have the very prescriptive SOPs, do it this way every time. But it sounds like you have this guardrails framework. Can you give us an example of what that guardrails framework might look like, a specific situation, the kind of latitude that people have? I'm a little curious about that.
Yeah, I could touch on any piece of our process and give examples, but one that comes to mind is how we start every project, which is creating the Renegade approach. So one of our core values is Renegade mentality, which is this idea, which is unique to us, and I haven't heard of anyone that has that core value. But it's one that we landed on very early in our growth trajectory. First couple months in business, it stuck. And for us, Renegade mentality is an individual who's willing to challenge the conventional past of the construction industry in order to build a better future. And so we refer to ourselves as renegades. We have this renegade mentality that we bring to the projects. And then we have in our process what's called Renegade approach. So we start out each project at the beginning with this idea of what is going to be our Renegade approach on each job. And it's a step in our process, but from the guardrails perspective that you're describing, we're not giving you formula, a checklist. It's a lot of creativity about, we've got to get the process looks like, let's make sure we have the right people in the room, and let's make sure that we put our heads together and work collaboratively. And these are the things that we want to accomplish. So it's kind of goals of what we're hoping to accomplish and the reason and kind of purpose behind that interaction. But then there's not a template or a script that you have to follow. So it takes a lot of creativity. And for the individual, we require that they do it. But what they do is a lot to do with the team. And it's this idea that every project should have something unique. We should be pushing the envelope. We should be challenging conventions of the past. And that's how we start pre-construction, because our opportunity to be impactful is right at the beginning, before we start drawing. Once the architects and engineers start designing, the farther they get down the road, the harder it is to make changes. So when we talk about a project, is at the concept stage, what are the opportunities that we have to bring something unique to the equation? And that we lean heavily on the teams and their creativity. The guardrail is that it needs to happen.
I like that. Makes perfect sense. What advice would you give to a business owner who wants to scale their business, but they struggle to let go of control, which is a pretty common thing in my experience?
Yeah. I can certainly identify with that. And when we got to the 5-year point, it was a time of tremendous reflection for me as a leader and as a founder, because we got to 5 years, and by all, from an outside perspective, tremendous success for being a 5-year-old business. We had spun off a very capable heavy civil construction group that wasn't started in the beginning. So at this point in 2018, we were 3 years into heavy civil. We're 5 years into building. 2 very capable construction companies that are kind of operating side by side. Building business, tremendous success. And so it caused me to really take a step back and recognize that I was the impediment to our growth. And certainly that was one of the, maybe call it failures, that became an opportunity for me as an entrepreneur, is I should have done it earlier. And so in some ways I look at it and say, it took me too long to recognize it, but there was a very intentional effort that from that point forward, we started to transition a bunch of segments of the business to capable members of our team, and to have less of the command and control structure that's centered around me as we went through startup mode. Now, little defense for myself, and I think for other entrepreneurs out there, when I started, it started out with just me. And so as you onboard people, of course, it's a matter of getting comfortable with them as individuals. It's a matter of trusting in their abilities and giving them the ability to be more impactful. And certainly those things take time. And I recognize that. But for our business, me letting go and elevating myself out of the level of control of all aspects of the business that I started with in the beginning, of just being an entrepreneur and a one-man band initially, that evolution took me 5 years to recognize, and that's been a big part of our success. So since then, we've gone from 100 people to 250. We've gotten significantly better as an organization at executing. So if I look back and say first 5 versus second 5, the second 5, we've had tremendous success that exceeded my expectations of what I thought we might be able to do when we started. And a lot of that is attributed to this recognition that as an entrepreneur, you can't do it all. You've got to trust the team. You've got to really put more emphasis into building the team and less emphasis into building projects. And so I completely changed how I showed up over a period of time. And now we're poised for the next step in our growth journey. And I'm very excited for where that'll bring us. And it's causing me and challenging me to, again, evolve in how I show up, because what worked for me the last 5 years is not going to work the next 5, given, again, more scale, more complexity, geographical regions that I'm not necessarily embedded in. So there's a whole nother challenge that is waiting for me in the next 5.
I heard somebody use a mountain climbing analogy, and they said, when you get to the top of one mountain, you know what's there? There's one of two things. Either there's nothing, or there are more mountains, and you just keep climbing more mountains. And I think a lot of people fall into this trap of thinking they want to get somewhere. They think there's a finish line. There's this entrepreneurial finish line, and that causes, they think, when I get to this point, I'll be happy and I'll be done and I'll be comfortable and all this sort of stuff. But I really think the entrepreneurial journey we're just mountain climbers. And once you climb one mountain, you're just in a position to climb the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's just what mountain climbers do.
Yeah, and the Jim Collins Stockdale paradox comes into mind as well. That we love Jim Collins as an author, and as a group have studied every one of his books, and use it as an opportunity for us to strategic plan around what's next for the organization. And that lesson of the individuals in that obviously intense environment that he describes of being a camp, and the idea that you were going to get released next Christmas, and those people never made it. And so certainly that's one of the lessons that we've learned, that, we're on a very long journey, especially in the context of our overarching goal of trying to be one of the small factors that helps move the industry forward. We've got so much work ahead of us that, at times it feels overwhelming, but, it's definitely a journey and a marathon for us, and not at all a sprint that we're working towards.
Yeah. A few rapid fire questions, and then I'll ask you where people can follow you, find out more about what you guys are up to. What city are you in, and what's the best restaurant to visit there?
I'm in New Orleans, and being in New Orleans, we are spoiled. I guess for those that have been to New Orleans before, there's so many great places to eat that honestly, I personally bounce around a lot, and it's hard to pick one.
What's one
that my wife and I actually enjoy a lot is there's a place called Pesh, which is actually not one of the kind of old school restaurants that New Orleans is famous for. It's somewhat newer, but Pesh, and I love it because it's just kind of fresh Mediterranean. It's seafood, which is, of course, we're in a great place to have seafood, and just their preparation of it. I like to eat pretty clean and healthy, and so I love that place.
Nice. What is this one might be a little personal, but what's a band or a type of music that you're into that you like that might surprise some people?
So my music for me is, I've always been one to listen to a little bit of everything. And so maybe in terms of surprise, a recent one, which is a result of my son who loves to play guitar, and he's into electric guitar. And so he actually found on his own, without me prompting it, Pantera. So very heavy metal that he likes to listen to because he got into electric guitar. He found it and then ended up finding out that actually the lead singer for Pantera is from New Orleans. And so New Orleans connection there, and he grabbed onto that and loves playing Pantera on his electric guitar. And so that's one that he likes to listen to, that I guess I certainly love to take up the interest of the kids. But they were around when I was in high school in New Orleans, and kind of local group that is in the heavy metal space, and certainly not music that I guess most people would think that someone like myself would be listening to.
Yeah, very cool. And last rapid fire question, what is the number one book that should be required reading for entrepreneurs?
It's hard for me to go away from, I just happened to mention this a few minutes ago. When we started the business, the first books, we've got a book club that I started, and it's still active today, 10 or 11 years later. And reading is a big part of our culture as an organization. So the first book that we did as a group in our book club is Good to Great. And that Jim Collins book, for an entrepreneur or someone in business, there are just so many lessons in there that we learn from. as a startup business from the beginning. And we still have conversations today, 10, 11 years later, that refer back to some of the discussions that we had around that book when we were getting started.
Yeah. It's incredible how much value you can get out of a $15 or $20 book. It's such a deal. That's a really good one. Well, great stuff. Where should people go if they want to follow you, learn more about your companies, apply for a job? Where's the best place or places for them to go?
We're, in terms of social media, LinkedIn is the easiest place to find me as an individual. That's actually the only social media I'm on. So LinkedIn is where you can find me as an individual. And then all of our companies are there as well. But then from a web perspective is certainly in terms of learning about the organization, WJ Palmisano.com, which then pushes you to our other sites that are buildimpetus.com for the impetus side of the organization, and then Think RNGD for our latest startup that's the innovation lab for our organization, RNGD, or internally called Renegade.
Very good. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to be on here. Congratulations on the success, getting to the stage of the mountain where you're at, and knowing that there are more mountains to climb. Really appreciate the work you're doing to advance the industry, make things better. That's very important to us too. And thanks for taking the time to share, Wes. This has been fantastic. Hey, it's Todd here. And one more thing before you go. Look, if you own a construction business and you want to put the right systems in place so you can either scale it up, maybe you want to step away from it, be able to take a proper vacation, maybe you want to sell it someday, maybe you just want to have more freedom, or maybe make it more profitable, or maybe you just want to get out of constant firefighting mode and make your phone stop ringing all the time. You really have three options if you want to make a meaningful change in your business. Option one is do nothing. Status quo, keep doing the same things, getting the same results. Option two, you can DIY it. You can do it yourself. You can reinvent the wheel. You can read books, listen to podcasts, try to piece together a solution, use trial and error. Or option number three, if you want meaningful change, is to find a proven system that delivers the results you're looking for. Sort of like if you use software for project management or for your bookkeeping, I assume you probably didn't try to code your own software. You found a proven system that delivered the results you're looking for, right? Well, if you're looking for a proven system to systematize your business, we've helped hundreds of construction business owners implement our systems in their business, specifically our nail the handoff pre-construction process in their business. It works for home builders, remodelers, commercial general contractors. It also works really well for trade contractors like electricians, concrete contractors, site, utility, plumbing. And it's part of our Systematize Your Construction Business program. So if you want to see what systematizing your business looks like, what nailing the handoff looks like, and the positive side effects that come with that, then the next step would be to schedule a free business evaluation call with my team. And you could do that by going to constructionleadingedge.com/apply, APPLY, or just go to our website, constructionleadingedge.com, and tap the Apply Now button. You'll learn about the 5-step process we've helped hundreds of people implement to systematize their construction business. Most importantly, you'll get an objective third-party evaluation of your business to answer one really big question. Is your business designed to fail, or is it designed to succeed? So let me ask you this. If your business was unintentionally designed to fail, when would you rather find out? Now, while there's time to do something about it, or later on when it's maybe too late? This business evaluation call is totally free. There are no strings attached, no pressure. And it could be the best hour you've spent working on your business in a long time. So our schedule fills up pretty quickly. So if you're interested, go over to constructionleadingedge.com/apply, or go to constructionleadingedge.com and tap the Apply Now button to book your business evaluation call. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you got value out of this podcast. If you could take a moment, if you did, and leave a rating or a review, or share this with somebody who needs to hear it, I would appreciate it. Todd Dawalt from Construction Leading Edge, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.